My brother faked a mental breakdown to torch my shot at a filmmaking scholarship, so I dug up the truth and watched his perfect mask shatter. 4 years later, he's emailing me from a group home in Atlanta, asking if we can ever be brothers again. Growing up in Athens, Georgia, Nate was the golden boy, valedictorian, lacrosse star, the kid my parents paraded at every UGA tailgate. I was the scrawny younger sibling, 3 years behind, always lugging around a camcorder, trying to make short films that didn't suck. When I was 10, I'd sneak into Nate's room to watch his DVD. Wes Anderson, Tarantino, stuff I barely understood but thought was cool because he liked it. I'd beg him to watch my shaky iPhone videos, hoping he'd say I had potential. But Nate didn't want a fan, he wanted a punching bag. Every time I showed my family a clip at our Memorial Day cookout, he'd scoff, "Not bad. But I could direct circles around you if I cared about artsy crap." It wasn't just sibling rivalry. It was like he needed me to crash and burn, so he could keep shining. The first time I gave up trying to impress him was after my 13th birthday. Mom got me a used Canon camcorder. Nothing fancy, but it was my ticket to making real films. I was buzzing, ran to Nate's room to show him. He was scrolling Instagram, barely glanced up and said, "Let's see what it can do." I handed it over, thinking he'd test the zoom or something. Instead, he tripped and dropped it onto the hardwood floor. The lens cracked, the screen went black. "My bad," he said, shrugging, already back on his phone. I stood there, heart in my throat, while my parents bought his clumsy act. That was the moment I learned to keep my dreams on lockdown. By 15, I was making short films for local contests, posting them on YouTube, even won a regional award for a documentary about Athens' music scene. R.E.M. Roots, local dive bars, that kind of thing. I kept it from Nate, but Dad couldn't resist bragging at our Sunday potlucks. Nate's jaw would clench, but he'd play it cool, saying, "Cute hobby, but you'll need a real job someday." I ignored him, focused on my big break. A full ride scholarship to NYU Tisch School of the Arts, contingent on a killer portfolio and interview. It was my shot to get out of Athens, maybe make it in Hollywood. I spent months editing, barely sleeping, my laptop humming late into the night. Nate got weirdly nice right before the interview. He offered to help me rehearse my pitch, said he wanted me to nail it. I was naive enough to buy it, thinking maybe college had mellowed him. The interview was virtual, a panel of Tisch professors on Zoom. I was ready, but halfway through, my phone started buzzing with texts from a random number. "You're a fraud. You'll bomb. Everyone knows your films are trash." My voice shook. I stumbled over answers I'd practiced 100 times. The professors' faces stayed blank. I tanked. Afterward, Nate was in the kitchen, eating leftover pizza, all casual. "Rough one, huh?" he said, not even looking up. I knew he was behind it, but I had no proof. I didn't get the scholarship. My parents tried to be supportive, but I could feel their disappointment, like I'd let them down. I kept my mouth shut about Nate, started watching him like a hawk. A few months later, I got another chance a spot in a National Youth Film Festival in Austin, with scouts from Sundance and major studios. I begged my parents to keep it off social media, but Nate overheard Mom gushing to her book club. That's when he dropped the bomb that changed everything. One night, Mom woke me up, tears streaming down her face. "Nate's in the hospital." She said, "He had a breakdown. They're saying it's severe depression." Dad was already on the phone with insurance, voice cracking. Nate came home the next day, pale and quiet, claiming he'd been battling suicidal thoughts for months, that he'd hit rock bottom. Suddenly, our house was all about him. Mom quit her Zumba classes to watch him. Dad drained my festival travel fund to cover Nate's therapy sessions. Nate played it perfectly, hollow eyes, trembling hands, even a fake journal full of dark thoughts. I smelled the lie from a mile away, but he was untouchable. I got kicked out of my room so Nate could have a calm space. He started hosting these support circles, inviting his lacrosse buddies, our neighbors, even my film club friends, to talk about his mental health journey. But I noticed he was fine when he thought no one was looking, blasting Post Malone. In his room, sneaking out to parties, one night I caught him practicing his breakdown story, in the bathroom mirror, tweaking his fake tears like he was auditioning for a movie. I started recording everything, his late night FaceTime calls bragging about fooling everyone, screenshots of him at bars when he claimed to be at therapy. The festival was 6 weeks away, and Dad told me we couldn't afford the trip because of Nate's treatment costs. I was done. At one of Nate's support circles, I waited until the living room was packed. His friends, our Baptist preacher, the neighbor who brought a green bean casserole. I tapped my glass and said, "Nate, share your recovery story." "You're so brave." He launched into his rehearsed speech, voice cracking on cue. Halfway through, I pulled out my phone and played a recording of him laughing about how easy it was to fake a breakdown. The room went dead silent. His buddy Jake dropped his fork. Mom's sweet tea glass slipped, splashing the rug. Nate tried to spin it, said I'd edited the audio, but I had more. Screenshots of him at the Georgia Theater, a video of him mocking Dad's worried texts. I showed his journal, where the handwriting switched from neat to sloppy, like he'd gotten bored. He screamed, called me a jealous wannabe, then bolted out the door, his Jeep peeling out of the driveway. Mom turned to me, face red, and slapped me across the cheek. "How could you humiliate him when he's suicidal?" She yelled. Dad just stared at the floor, hands shaking. The next week was hell. Nate came back with proof, forged therapist notes, a fake prescription for Zoloft. He told my parents I was bullying him, jealous of his struggle. They bought it or wanted to. They dragged me to a counselor in Watkinsville, said I had anger issues. The counselor kept asking why I was lashing out at my sick brother. I tried explaining, but it sounded crazy without evidence. Nate got smarter, deleted his texts, locked his phone. He even accidentally dropped my external hard drive, where I stored my festival portfolio, into the sink. Clumsy me, he said, smirking as water seeped into the circuits. I started documenting everything in a Moleskine notebook, hidden under my mattress. Every lie, every slip-up. I caught him texting a friend about sending those Zoom interview texts. Turns out, he'd used a burner app. I needed someone to believe me, so I called Aunt Carla, the only one who'd ever called Nate out for lying about stuff like stealing my Halloween candy and blaming me. I met her at a Waffle House off Highway 316, showed her my notebook, played the recordings I'd backed up on Dropbox. Her face darkened with every file. This is messed up, she said, stirring her coffee. We're fixing this. Carla came over that weekend, acting like she was just visiting for the UGA game. She hugged Nate, said she was praying for his recovery. But at dinner, she started asking hard questions. Which hospital? What's the psychiatrist's name? Why no meds in the bathroom? Nate squirmed, said he didn't like talking about it. Carla pushed, said she had a friend at a psych clinic in Augusta who could check his records. His fork froze mid-bite. He mumbled something about needing air and shuffled to the porch. While he was gone, Carla showed my parents my evidence on her iPad, a folder labeled Nate's BS. The recordings hit like a gut punch. Nate's voice, smug, cackling about how he'd played the suicide card. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Dad's jaw worked like he was chewing glass. Nate came back, saw our faces, and started crying, saying we were ganging up on a depressed person. When that didn't work, he claimed I'd faked the recordings with AI. Then he said I'd spiked his energy drinks to make him say those things. His lies stacked up, each one shakier than the last. Dad stood up, slow, and asked, "Did you try to kill yourself? Tell me the truth." Nate tried tears, but Dad repeated the question, voice like steel. Finally, Nate exploded, screamed that I'd stolen his spotlight, that Mom and Dad only cared about my dumb films. He admitted faking the breakdown, said he had to because I was hogging all the attention. He even confessed to smaller stuff, deleting my film files, spreading rumors I was a slacker at school. Mom started sobbing, deep, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. Dad gripped the table, knuckles white. Nate lunged at me, screaming I'd ruined everything. Aunt Carla stepped in, grabbed his arm before he could swing. He shoved her hard, knocking her into the china cabinet. Glass shattered, a plate hit the floor. Mom screamed, blood running from a cut on Carla's hand. Dad tackled Nate, pinning him to the couch. Carla, calm as ever, called 911, gave the address like she was ordering takeout. Cops and paramedics showed up, took Nate for a psych hold. He was thrashing so hard, they worried he'd hurt himself. The house felt like a crime scene after. Mom needed stitches for a shard of glass in her palm. Dad drove her to Athens Regional in silence, the radio off, that night. They apologized, said they were so scared for Nate they'd been blind. I told them about the camcorder, the texts, years of his knives in my back. They looked like they'd aged a decade, realizing how deep it went. Nate spent a week at a psych ward in Lawrenceville, got diagnosed with narcissistic personality traits and a need for long-term therapy. My parents found him a program in Macon for personality disorders, not the fake depression he'd sold them. I focused on salvaging my life. The festival organizers had heard rumors I was unstable. Thanks to Nate telling my film club I'd attacked him, I sent them Carla's letter and my recordings, laid out the truth. They kept my slot, even gave me a prime screening time. I poured my soul into that film. A short about betrayal, shut in Athens' back alleys. The audience gave a standing ovation. A Sundance scout emailed me, said to submit next year. School was a nightmare. Nate's lacrosse buddies spread lies that I'd framed him. My lunch table at Clark Central emptied out, kids whispering I was a psycho. My film club stuck by me, and my teacher, Mr. Dawson, wrote a glowing letter to colleges about my resilience. But the damage wasn't just social. And, why, you got an anonymous tip. Nate's handwriting all over it, claiming I'd bullied a suicidal family member. They put my application on hold, pending a review. I was gutted, my dream school slipping away. I kept gathering evidence, hiding tiny voice recorders around the house. Under the coffee table, behind the TV. I caught Nate on the phone, laughing about how he'd screwed my NYU chances. His voice was cold, like he was proud of it. I saved every file to multiple cloud drives, paranoid he'd find them. My parents were too deep in denial to listen, brushing off my attempts to talk about Nate's lies. That's when I leaned harder on Carla. She'd always seen through Nate, even when he was a kid lying about who broke Mom's vase. She drove down from Augusta, brought a pecan pie like it was just a friendly visit. Over coffee, she went through my evidence, her lawyer brain picking out holes in Nate's story, like how he claimed weekly therapy but never left the house on session days. Carla suggested a family meeting, but we had to be strategic. If we came on too strong, my parents would shut down. We planned it for Sunday dinner, when everyone was relaxed. The table set with Mom's meatloaf and mashed potatoes. Nate was in full victim mode, sighing about how therapy was so draining. Carla started casual, asking about his treatment plan, which hospital he'd been to. Nate gave vague answers, said he didn't want to burden us. Carla pushed, mentioned she knew a psychiatrist who could get him a second opinion. Nate's eyes darted to the door. He excused himself, said he felt overwhelmed, and slipped upstairs. While he was gone, Carla pulled out her iPad, showed my parents the evidence. She'd organized it like a courtroom. Presentation recordings, screenshots, a timeline of lies. Mom didn't want to look at first, kept twisting her napkin. But Dad leaned in, face hardening as he heard Nate laugh about faking his breakdown. When Nate came back, the air was thick. He tried crying, said we were attacking a sick person. Carla didn't flinch, asked him point blank to name his therapist. He couldn't. Dad asked again if he'd ever been suicidal. Nate's face twisted, and he broke. Screamed that I'd stolen his parents' love, that my films were pathetic, and I didn't deserve NYU. He admitted everything, faking the depression, sending the NYU tip, smashing my hard drive. Mom collapsed into sobs. Dad's hands shook, but he stayed quiet, like he was processing a death. Nate tried to storm out, but Dad grabbed his arm, said he wasn't going anywhere until they figured this out. Nate shoved him, hard enough to knock Dad into the wall. Carla called 911 again, her voice steady. The cops took Nate back to the psych ward, this time for a longer evaluation. Mom needed a sedative from the paramedics, her hands trembling too hard to hold a glass. Dad sat on the couch, staring at the floor, muttering about how he'd missed the signs. They apologized to me later, said they'd been so wrapped up in saving Nate they'd failed me. I told them about every cut he'd inflicted, the camcorder, the rumors, the years of feeling invisible. They cried, promised to make it right. Nate was moved to a residential program in Macon, diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder and antisocial traits. I threw myself into fixing my life. I sent NYU the recordings, Carla's letter, and a new portfolio. They reinstated my application, said they admired my tenacity. The festival in Austin was a high point. My film won an audience award, and I got a summer internship offer from a small production company. But school was a slog. Nate's friends kept the rumors alive, calling me a liar in the halls. My grades dipped from the stress, and I had to beg teachers for extensions. Mr. Dawson helped, letting me use the media lab after hours to rebuild my portfolio. Nate came home after 3 months, mandated to weekly therapy. We avoided each other, living like strangers under one roof. He tried sabotaging me again, hacked my YouTube channel, deleted half my videos. I caught him because he used my old password. Cocky to cover his tracks, I installed a lock on my door, kept my laptop in a safe. Mom and Dad didn't argue, just nodded, like they finally got it. Family dinners were tense, everyone tiptoeing around Nate's mood swings. His therapist warned us recovery wasn't linear, that we had to protect ourselves while he worked on himself. The next year was a grind. Nate had good days, helping with dishes, acting almost normal. Then he'd slip, glaring at me when Mom praised my festival win. I got into NYU, full scholarship, and moved to New York. The distance helped. I threw myself into classes, made friends who didn't know my baggage. Nate stayed in therapy, started a part-time job at a Walmart. He sent me emails, short ones, apologizing without pushing for a reply. I ignored them. At first, too raw to care. Sophomore year, I started answering, cautious. We texted about safe stuff. Marvel movies, UGA games. He asked about my films, seemed legit interested. I tested him, told him about a short I got into a campus showcase. He didn't flip, just said, "That's awesome, man." By junior year, he moved to a group home in Atlanta, working on his GED. We met at a Starbucks near Piedmont Park, neutral ground. He looked tired but not angry. Apologized for specific things, the camcorder, the NYU tip, the YouTube hack. Said he'd been jealous since we were kids, felt like my talent made him invisible. I didn't forgive him, not yet, but I said I'd keep the door open. We started talking more, video calls every few weeks. He came to a screening of my junior thesis film, sat in the back, clapped like he meant it. Last month, he emailed, said he's got a small apartment now, a job at a car wash. Asked if I'd visit, maybe bring my camera, show him what I'm working on. I'm not sure I'm ready, but I didn't shut him down. He sent me a keychain with a tiny film reel, a note saying, "For your Oscar someday." I keep it on my desk, not sure what it means. Maybe it's proof people can change even after they've wrecked you. We're not tight, but we're something. Fragile, real, ours. For now, that's enough.